Many of the biggest mysteries in the world will never be solved. As time passes, evidence disappears, if it was ever collected. Witnesses pass away, and anybody who could possibly know the answer to the mysteries are lost to history. Number 5. Easter Island is one of the most fascinating places on the planet. With many mysteries, scholars are still trying to understand. We have little information today about the history of the civilization that called the island its home, and only likely theories in way of explanations for things such as the Moai statues that have made the island world famous. Unfortunately, one source of information about the history of the Rapa Nui people is lost to time. Rongo writing is a writing system or pre-writing system that originated on the island. If it can be classified as a full writing system, it's one of only a handful of times writing has been developed independently in all of human history. It's also the only known writing system from Polynesia. The writing consists of a series of glyphs, which include pictographs and geometric shapes. The writing was inscribed onto wooden boards using sharp stones or even shark's teeth, with letters falling in neat rows separated by lines of blank wood. Sometimes these lines were fluted, with the raised part of the wood acting as the barrier between lines of script. But this doesn't seem to have been common practice. The script was read in a rather unique way, where each line was orientated upside down to the one before it. Unfortunately, a series of tragic events wiped out everyone that could read the writing. After its discovery by the Europeans, Easter Island was the subject of slave raids from nearby South America. The people also fell victim to diseases from the Old World, as well as environmental problems that caused food shortages. According to the people who survived the tragedies, literacy was limited to only the ruling families and priests. Nobody who could read survived the raiders or the diseases. When a Christian missionary visited the island in the 19th century, he reported that pieces of wood with what would become known as Rongo writing etched into them were relatively common, and the local people didn't pay them any attention. However, the discovery wasn't really investigated at the time. It wasn't until about 20 years later that Europeans became interested in the writing. An Italian bishop was sent a piece of wood with a fishing line made from human hair as a gift from a Catholic convert on the island. After unraveling the line, he discovered the writing and sent expeditions to find more. Unfortunately, it was discovered that the people living on the islands had been using the wooden boards as scrap wood, as the writing on it was now useless and no one could read it. With only a few specimens remaining, deciphering the writing has proven impossible, and will likely remain that way until more pieces are ever found. Number 4. In July of 1928, the then third richest man on the planet fell to his death from a plane. How this happened, whether it was accidental or intentional, is a mystery that will never be conclusively solved. Alfred Lowenstein was the son of a Brussels banker and grew up in relatively modest circumstances. However, he had a good business head and a good grasp of the future industries of the world. He bet on the growth of the artificial silk market, which was at the time just beginning, but soon skyrocketed in importance. He was one of the chief shareholders in the Belgian railway system. He owned iron mines, steel furnaces, and coal properties, and even rubber plantations in the Congo. He was the richest man in Europe and wanted to use his wealth to help his country. At an economically unpredictable time, he offered an interest-free loan to Belgium so they could stabilize their country, and then offered a loan of only 2% to nearby France. The act made him famous around the world. Alfred was particularly fond of planes and owned 2, which he would use to fly around Europe. It was on one such trip that Alfred fell to his death. It was a relatively routine trip from Croydon in the UK to Brussels on July 4th, 1928. Alfred was traveling with 6 other people, including the pilot and plane mechanic. while the plane was over the English Channel, Alfred excused himself to go to the bathroom, which was located at the back of the plane. He disappeared through the door to the entrance lobby, and he didn't come back. After a while, Alfred's valet went to see if his boss was okay. He found the plane's exterior door open and Alfred nowhere to be seen. The pilot made an emergency landing on a beach near Dunkirk, which was under control of the French army. They apprehended and questioned the passengers and pilot, but no one could explain what happened. The entrance lobby where Alfred disappeared from had 3 doors, one to the plane cabin, one on the left that led to the bathroom, and one on the right that was the only exterior door. It didn't seem like Alfred could have accidentally gone through the wrong door, but the pilot and the mechanic did say that it was easy to open. It may have been accidentally opened when someone leaned on it, and potentially Alfred just fell through. However, the specific type of aircraft Alfred had been using was tested by the British Air Military, and they argued that it was impossible for the door to be opened accidentally. Alfred was eventually found by a fishing boat near the coast of France. A small amount of alcohol was in his system, which his family found odd as Alfred never drank. The discovery only raised suspicions that the incident had been no accident and Alfred had been assassinated, but if so, the person behind the conspiracy was never caught. Number 3. The story of the Pied Piper is a relatively well-known fairy tale that has been around in one form or another since at least the 13th century. The version of the story most people know today tells of a town named Hamelin, which was infested with rats. A stranger dressed in a multicolored outfit came to the town and claimed he could get rid of their rat problem and asked for a payment of a substantial amount of gold. Seeing no other way out of their problem, the town agreed to pay the man if he could get rid of the vermin. Sure enough, the man took out a pipe and played a tune which caused all the rats in town to follow him. He then led them out of the town and into a river. Of course, the town didn't pay the piper, even when he warned them that there would be consequences. So the piper played another tune, and this time all the children in the town followed him. In some versions of the story, the children also ended up in the river. In others, they're led to a mountain where they were swallowed up and never seen again. The fairy tale now tells a cautionary tale to always keep your promises. But the story may have originally been the story of a dark event that happened in the German town of Hamelin in 1284. An entry in the town's chronicle from 1384 simply reads, "It is 100 years since our children left." The original version of the fairy tale didn't feature the rat infestation. It was a story about a man who came and charmed away the town's children. This part of the story was immortalized with a stained glass window of a church in Hamelin. It showed the piper in his colorful or pied outfit, leading away several children dressed in white. The image seems to be that something happened, or at least a metaphor for a tragic event. While it seems unlikely a literal magical piper was behind the event, what exactly happened in Hamelin has been lost to history. Some have suggested it was an illness that swept through the town, taking the lives of many of the young children. Others have said it could have been a mass migration or a children's crusade. Another explanation is a landslide, which may have wiped out a school, or could be represented by the mountain swallowing the children. The real explanation is now lost to history, but the event, whatever it was, is still remembered in Hamelin to this day. Number 2. On August 16, 1942, a deflating US Navy blimp came to a bumpy landing on top of a car in a quiet neighborhood in Daly City, California. The residents of the street rushed out to help the servicemen they believed were trapped inside, only to find the door to the blimp's gondola had been latched open and the occupants were nowhere to be seen. Lieutenant Ernest DeWitt Cody and Charles Ellis Adams were both Navy veterans and had experience piloting blimps. A few months earlier, Cody had piloted the same blimp to deliver precious cargo to an aircraft carrier, a mission that took significant piloting skill. Adams had 20 years of experience on rigid airships and had helped rescue passengers from the Hindenburg disaster years earlier. This was the first day as a lighter-than-air patrol officer, but he was more than qualified for the job. Both men had incredible track records, and there was no reason to believe either would go AWOL. The day had started like any other. They left Treasure Island at just after 6 a.m. to patrol the area within a 50-mile radius of San Francisco. People living and working in the city at the time were used to the airships by now. An hour and a half into the patrol, the crew radioed into base to report a suspicious oil slick, which could have been a sign of an enemy submarine. It was the last radio message they would send. As was routine, they dropped smoke flares, which was spotted by a ship, who readied themselves to attack whatever may have surfaced. For more than an hour, the blimp circled over the oil slicks before it was lowered down to just a few meters over the sea. The Navy ship and a civilian fishing vessel watched the blimp through binoculars, both spotting 2 people inside the gondola. Then, shortly after 9 a.m., the blimp rose again and disappeared into the clouds. Its journey over the next few hours was strange. At one point, it ascended a height close to the limit of how high this type of blimp could go. It started to lose gas and sag, and at one point touched down on a beach, startling the few people bathing and crashing into the side of a hill. It bent the propeller, and one of its depth charges came loose, allowing the blimp to rise again before it finally came to a rest at 11:30 a.m. The blimp was followed on the ground by firefighters and onlookers who peered into the gondola with binoculars. Again, 2 people were spotted inside, but by the time the blimp had come to rest, they were gone. What happened to the 2 servicemen remains a mystery. The obvious explanation is that they fell out of the gondola at some point, possibly when the blimp dipped down to inspect the oil slicks. Though witnesses claim the blimp's movements after that point still seem to be intentional, as if it were being piloted. It's possible they were just mistaken though. The people who reported seeing figures in the gondola could have also been mistaken, or they could have made up the sightings to add to the mystery. Others claim that they were testing experimental technology which overcame them, causing them to fall out of the cabin, or that the 2 men got into a fight while in the air, and the disappearance was the perfect cover story. If the 2 did fall into the water, neither body has ever been found. Number 1. The story of the man in the iron mask has captured the imaginations of fiction writers and conspiracy theorists since the 1680s. The anonymous French prisoner has become legendary, though his identity remains a mystery. The unknown man was imprisoned sometime during the reign of King Louis XIV, the famous Sun King. At first, he was kept in an isolated fortress in the Alps, under the watch of former musketeer Bethonie de Saint-Mars. In 1987, he and Saint-Mars were moved to another prison on a tiny Mediterranean island. The quiet, unassuming notification of his move is the first written record we have of this mysterious prisoner. The prisoner didn't actually wear an iron mask though. This detail would come much later, when novelists and those trying to discredit the king added to the rumors surrounding the figure. The mask was actually made of velvet and resembled an accessory which was popular among high-class women who wanted to protect their face from the sun. One part of the legend that does seem to be true is that nobody, even others working at the prisons, knew the man's real identity. After he and Saint-Mars were transferred to another prison, one guard wrote how the prisoner always wore a mask and his name was never pronounced. Whoever it was, the people in charge did not want his identity to get out. The prisoner passed away from natural causes in 1703, and he was buried in a Parisian cemetery. His belongings and clothes were allegedly burned at dawn, and some even claimed the walls of his cell were whitewashed so any message he may have left behind would never be seen. After his death, the rumors surrounding the man only grew. Many claimed the king himself had ordered the man's imprisonment. It was alleged he was a lover of the king's wife or his mother. Others claim he was the king's real father or an older brother who would have posed a threat to Louis's reign. Given the Sun King was described as a tyrant to his enemies, there was no end to the theories put forward simply to try to destabilize him. Another theory claims he was the corrupt superintendent of finance who allegedly stole money from the former king and queen of England. Alternatively, it may have been his valet who found out about the conspiracy and was imprisoned before he could tell. Whatever the answer is, almost as mysterious as the identity of the man behind the mask was why these two were kept alive in the first place. If this person was so dangerous their identity could never be revealed to the public, it seems strange that given the time period, authorities wouldn't simply take his life. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you like this video, be sure to click that like button. Also, don't forget to subscribe and click that notification bell to keep up to date with all of our future uploads. But I've been Ty Knots, and I'll catch you guys in the next video.